This conference will now be recorded.
And I'm wondering, thank you for your patience. This is our first time using GoToMeeting for one of these. I guess we don't start it. I guess it's just going ahead and starting. And we were talking about that the folks on this task force are mainly in state agencies, so we should be able to use Teams, and we'll probably switch to Teams after this platform because this one can be a little bit cumbersome. Okay, I'm able to find the agenda. I haven't. I'm looking for the list. We'll try pulling it up too.
I have an up if you want me to call roll and then Wesley can take over from there.
Yeah, that would be great, Felicia. Thank you. That would help a lot. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Lucinda Saito.
Present.
Stephen Moisey. I think I saw him on screen.
Yes, you did.
Okay, great. Elaine Perea. Leonardo Delgado.
Present.
Steve Zurich. Secretary Trujillo.
Present.
Tom Cole or John Garcia.
Tom Cole is here. Good morning.
Hi, Tom. Anna Linden.
Hi, I'm here. Anna Linden Weller is the last name.
Great. Thank you, Anna Linden. And Alyssa Latucci. Secretary Cordova.
Present.
Justin Garote. Amber Rodriguez. James Tobihua. And Joanna Nelson.
Present. Okay, can you confirm that we do have a quorum, Felicia? Sounded like we did.
I believe so. Yes, I think we wrote.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead. I'm trying to mute everyone if you're not speaking because it's giving a feedback. So again, thanks for your patience as we're using this GoToMeeting platform. And I just see that Ms. Trujillo responded and said that they are here. Felicia, if you're able to note that in the chat. The name wasn't called, but from higher ed is here.
Yeah, Patricia Trujillo. Amber Rodriguez's name was called. I think we're both on the committee, but we're splitting duties because we had another meeting at the same time. So I'm here today and she'll be here next time.
Great. Thank you so much, Patricia. All right, noted. Okay, well, thank you so much. And Steve you're asking to be the presenter. So I will try to do that while we move forward. So again, thanks for your patience as we're dealing with this. We were discussing that we'll probably do Teams next time. Our department has an account with GoToMeeting, and we thought that this would be easier, but doesn't look like it. We'll go ahead and switch to Teams for the next meeting. So again, thanks for your patience and your flexibility as we navigate this platform, and I'll cross my fingers and hope we get through it without too many technical difficulties. But thanks all for joining us. This is our Sustainable Economy Task Force meeting. Today's April 20th of 2022, and we're really happy that you're able to join us and really appreciate the time that you're taking to participate and join this important discussion. So we've already gone through the roll call and the making introductions. I do see we've got quite a bit of community and outside members joining us. So welcome to all. I think I saw Deputy John Clark from EDD. Do you want to say anything, Deputy Clark, before we get started?
Just good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here virtually and look forward to a great discussion. And it seems like we have some interesting items on the agenda for today.
Great, thank you, Deputy. And then I saw James Powiwa, the chair of the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council, has joined us. So welcome, James. Let me know if you need help with audio or video. So I sent the agenda out to all, and as well, it can be found on our Sustainable Economy Task Force page. I'll put that in the chat. And hopefully you had a chance to review the minutes from last meeting that was held on February 16th. We had a great discussion. And on the agenda, we do have an action to take of improving the minutes from last meeting. So if anyone wants to make a motion, and a reminder, because this is a virtual meeting, if you can state your name and the agency that you're representing, that would be great. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved. This is Yolanda with DWS.
Seconded. This is Anna Linden Weller with MNERD.
Thank you. All right, so moved. Let me pull this up. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into it. In terms of updating this group from the work from the advisory council, we'll take some time right now to get into some actions that they were able to take at their last meeting. And so I'd like to welcome James Powiwa, the chair from the advisory council, to talk about the working groups that were recently formed. And then I'll give an update after him about the contractor to help us with this work. So I'll turn it over to you, James. Hopefully you have access to audio. Are you able to?
I hope so
Okay.
too. Great. Well, good to see you all. My apologies that I'm not joining via camera. My internet has been unstable all morning. But at our last meeting, we approved working groups, which I will get into in just a moment. But another thing that we approved was to adopt equity principles, which we will be looking at a template that the Governor's Climate Change Task Force developed and adopted, which I'm happy to share that draft from MNERD. And I'm not sure how to do that, Johanna, if I should just email the group or if it's possible to put it in the chat.
Sure, James, you can put it in the chat. You can email it to me. And then we do have an agenda item a little bit further of you leading a discussion about those equity principles. So if you want to, you could talk about it then as well.
Sure, I can go ahead and do that. So we decided to form 4 different working groups. One was education. The second one is sustainable and equitable economic development. Tribal outreach, and I believe community engagement were the 4 different groups. And there will also be a steering committee made up of each one of those working group leads. We're excited to get to work. And we also look forward to, as Johanna was mentioning, once there is a contractor in place, getting further support for all of the volunteer members of the advisory committee.
Thank you, James. And if you have a second, do you mind writing those in the chat, those working groups?
Yes, I can definitely do that.
All right, wonderful. Does anybody have any feedback or questions about those working groups that James just mentioned?
I will say, as people think through any questions they may have, each one of these working groups hopes to be able to work with the different and various departments that are present on this call and part of the main task force. So for instance, I think it's really important for the tribal outreach and engagement working group to interface with IAD as an example.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. All right, moving on to the contractor discussion. If nobody has any questions, and feel free to jump in if something comes to you. We did put out a call for proposals, and that was live. I think there's been about a month that's been advertised. And this group did receive legislative funding to work with a contractor to help coordinate the work of this group, as well as the advisory council, and also prepare and update the plan to make presentations in the fall to the legislature. And let me see if I can share my screen. If you didn't see that call for proposals, I know I sent it out to this group, and that closed on the 18th. And we got 2 responses from contractors to that call for proposals. And we're actually, maybe other agencies are in a similar position, but we're dealing with a lot of RFPs and contracts. And so it was a low number to only have 2 contractors respond. And the hope is that a decision could be made very quickly, hopefully this week, early next week, so we can go ahead and bring them on board and get that contract put in place. Another thing to point out is that the contract will go to the end of the year. And I think that could have contributed to the low turnout in proposal submittals. And then July 1st, we'll be able to put out an RFP or probably a call for proposals, because the dollar amount will be less than $60,000. And then the work that will be focused on the next half of the year will be compiling the feedback, compiling the information that would be gathered in this phase to be able to make updates to the state economic development plan, and of course involve this group. I think it was mentioned too that a lot of the work will be focused on looking at the plan, and we've talked about this in earlier meetings, that it's looking at the plan and identifying what's in progress now and being able to communicate that. It's also looking at a priority list of, what's next steps. It's looking at offering feedback for communities that are looking for help to figure out how to implement the state economic development plan, or how to use it as guidance for their planning efforts. So it's an interesting place to be at the first year when the plan is very fresh. So it'll be great to work with your agencies, as well as the advisory council and the contractor, to identify this first step of really figuring out what entities, what communities, what points of view were skipped over or were missed, that we can gather that input at this point. So it'll be great to get your feedback on that. And I'll put the call for proposals in the chat if you haven't already reviewed it. But anybody have any questions or discussion about the contractor? Really, really excited to bring them on. It feels a little bit delayed, but I'm thrilled to have some support to be able to engage in this work and really, I think, be that platform and that interface to help us communicate efforts and activities around the plan to increase engagement around it. All right, well, I'll go ahead and move on to the next item. And I'd like to welcome Anna Linden Weller, the policy advisor at MNERD, to talk about the climate task force. This action has been brought up a couple of times already about the work that group is doing and where's the overlap and how can we work together. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Anna Linden, and I think you should be able to share your screen. We will figure that out as we go.
I have just requested to share my screen, so let's see if that works.
All right. We will
Let me see if I can also.
In a busy Wednesday, which I'm sure you all have, you can maybe find some comedy in using a platform other than Teams or Zoom. Hopefully. All right, you should have control.
Okay. Can people see my screen? I'm going to move this so you don't have to look at that. And also attempt to get this to be in presentation mode, or just leave it because I think, can everybody see well enough? Okay. So I want to give a short overview of the Climate Change Task Force, which we often abbreviate as the CCTF. I am one of the sort of staff leadership persons on that task force, and it is chaired by the secretaries of MNERD and NMED, so Secretary Cottrell-Probst and Secretary Kenny. So it comes from, it was established by the executive order that was the third executive order that Governor Lujan Grisham had in general. So in 2019, it's the executive order on climate change, and it set our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and it created this task force, and it directed agencies to incorporate climate change mitigation and adaptation into policies and operations in general. And what the task force is for is basically to help state agencies figure out how to do that, and to set state government-wide policy and planning around climate action. So that's the general charge of the task force. And so this is our third year, going into our fourth year of existence. We've actually done a lot of stuff, but we are kind of in a transitional moment right this moment, which is actually great because it means that we're going to be able to really interface very well with this group, the SET Force and the SEAC. So this is a good description, a brief overview of what we do, all the things that we do. We have had over the past 3 years these sector-specific climate action teams. So we've got one for transportation, one for natural working lands, we have one for adaptation and resilience. There's some, depending on the year, there's somewhere between 6 and 9 of them. And they've been our interagency sort of staff level planning and policy engine for the first part of our existence, where I think you could describe it as we took stock of where we were, and then we tried to make as many fast, good changes as possible and fulfill the requests that were in that executive order that I mentioned on the previous slide. And we're actually pretty close to the end of that list, which is not a bad place to be 3 years in. We produce a yearly progress report, and those are available on our website. The one for 21 should be up there, but we're having some website issues, so it's kind of a whole thing. But that will be there very shortly. We have meetings, and we actually do a lot of work with NGOs and academia. We've worked with the US Climate Alliance very closely to do emissions analysis, so we really know what's going on a climate change and climate action level in New Mexico. And as James mentioned earlier, we helped to convene the group that wrote the climate equity principles. I would not say that we wrote them because it was a community-led effort that I'm actually really proud of, that it wasn't just some state government wonks in a corner. But one of the big tasks that we're approaching right now is how to have those equity principles flow through not just what the CCTF does, where we're using them already, but how to lace them into state government climate action policy through every agency, even people who aren't super involved with like air quality or electric vehicles or anything like that. So what we're working on right now is this, which is different than our annual reports have been. Our annual reports have been progress oriented. This is what we did, this is what's in process right now. This is a plan for the future. And we want it to be pretty thorough and pretty ambitious so we can meet our 2030 emissions reduction goals. So we're in the process of putting together our RFP for a consultant to help us out. We are working through how this is going to look, and it's going to be what we do in the second half of 22 with an aim of releasing it at the beginning of 23. Now, this is my best attempt at explaining kind of the complex feedback loop that we're using to create this. So you can see on here that we have the sort of our internal state government staff planning and analysis and our work with NGOs. Then we contributed to the climate equity principles. And we've come up with, those climate action teams have come up with some draft goals and milestones for how to get to our emissions reduction targets. And there are things like having a certain number of EVs on the road by 2030, like that kind of draft goal and milestone. We built a whole list of them. I'm not going to go over them here because it would take a long time and we have a pretty full agenda. And we took those goals and milestones and we convened a technical advisory group. This is still going on right now. There's a meeting this afternoon, in fact. And that technical advisory group was assembled from members of the public in a whole bunch of industries, in interest groups, NGOs, activists, policy people, basically all the smart people we could agree to get into a room for 4-hour meetings. And what we're asking of that group is look at what we made, how can we make it better, what is missing, what maybe doesn't work. So that's what we're working on right now. We're going to get at the end of that, and by the end of the fiscal year, a revised set of goals and milestones which will feed directly into the climate plan. And those revised goals and milestones will be what we take out for public input, for tribal engagement as part of putting this plan together. So basically, I think there's a really, really good opportunity right now to kind of figure out how the Set Force wants to collaborate in our plan and how we can match up our plan to the economic development, the sustainable economic development plans, so that we're talking the same language and we reinforce each other. And because we're at the very beginning of this process of creating this 5-year how do we get there map, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, and I hope you agree, to figure out how to do that collaboration. And that's all I've got, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is Yolanda from Workforce, and I'm just curious about the plan as you're moving along and you're identifying these pieces. Is the goal then to sort of identify where it has implications for in terms that, so like, does it call out like this would be education, this would be
Yes.
workforce? Okay, so that would be great, so that we could make sure that we're also aligning to what, you know, things that you're calling out as part of your plan. Thank you.
Yeah. The idea here is to produce something that is usable by the entirety of state government, the governor's office, and also is a guide to local and tribal governments of what we're doing, so they can hook into it where that's appropriate or desirable for them.
And I just want to add, because one of the things for us at the workforce development side is our state workforce plan is going to be coming up due. We have to modify ours for the next years, not modify, but actually implement a new workforce plan. So it would be nice to align it with whatever comes out of this climate action plan, especially if it calls out some things specifically around workforce.
What I'm beginning to see is this, there's a lot of different plans for different sectors of state government, and I think we can probably get them to lace together really well, and have them not be siloed. That would be kind of amazing if we could manage that. So yeah, let's figure out how to align those things.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I have to agree. I think it's perfect timing that as we bring a consultant on, that we will be able to work really closely with this. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions? I think I had seen in the chat, Anna Linden, a request to send this out to the group, if you're okay with that.
Sure, no
Okay.
problem. I will, why don't I send it to you and you can forward it
Sure.
to everybody?
Sure, that's great.
I'll do that right now when I stop sharing my screen. How do I do that in GoToMeeting? This is going to be entertaining.
I think I can do that.
Okay.
I am trying to do that.
Aha.
You were able to. All right, perfect.
Yes.
That's wonderful. It doesn't help that I'm on a little laptop either. That makes things even more interesting. I don't know if anyone can tell I have a cold, so I'm staying home out of the office today. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Anna Linden. I'm going to turn it over to the next agenda item, and that was James Pauvivois. And James, if hopefully you're still on, and you can talk a little bit more about the discussion that you brought up about the equity principles.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here and be happy to send these equity principles out to the group in follow-up. And just like Anna Linden said, a lot of thanks to MNERD and the Environment Department for convening a group of community stakeholders last summer to really dive into developing equity principles to help guide the climate change task force. And as chair of the advisory committee for the Sustainable Economy Task Force, we decided as a group that we would like to adopt those climate change equity principles to our economic development work. And I'll just go over those very briefly. Two things that the climate change equity principles did were to define two different phrases, and that is overly burdened communities and just transition. Overly burdened communities in SB 112, which established this task force, was actually, I think the phrase was directly impacted communities. And so this definition we believe is a lot more robust. And then for the equity principles themselves are divided into two groups. One is principles regarding process to develop and implement climate policies. There are three of them. One is engage overly burdened communities. Two, respect tribal sovereignty and require collaboration and consultation. And three, maintain accountability and transparency. And each one of those are defined, but I won't read them now. The other group is principles regarding design and effects of climate policies. So the first is to incorporate traditional knowledge and experience. The second is to advance equitable economic transition. The third is prioritize creating and maintaining universal access to utilities. And the final one is to reduce health and environmental impacts. So we plan to tweak those so that they're applicable to this task force, and we look forward to presenting them to the main task force once we're ready.
Great, thank you, James. Is there anything that you would want to share? Are those in a Word format that the group would be able to see? I could send those out afterward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I sent you over a PDF, but I can find a Word document and happy to share it with the group. And I just really appreciate Anna Linden's comment that MNERD and NMED and others are really trying to figure out how to incorporate these into policy and state work throughout. And I think that it's a work in progress, and it's important for us to, it's a first step in a good direction.
Thanks, James. And PDF works fine. We'll get that sent out to everyone. Does anyone have any questions or comments for James?
This is Anna Linden. I'd just like to thank James for all of the work that he did on these. And also, yeah, it's a first step, but I think it's a first step that hopefully will have like some 7 league boots behind it soon.
Well, and this is Yolanda. I mean, I think it brings up a really good point for all state agencies in terms of like equity, guiding principles around what we mean by that. I think we throw the word around pretty loosely around what we're hoping to accomplish. And I mean, it just really struck for me on the workforce side, when we talk about equity, what does that mean for us in terms of the way that we're delivering or organizing our workforce development activities? I don't think we've, I think we just think about it, but I don't know that we really have ever set principles around it, which I just want to thank you for that thought piece, because I think that's something important for us to just even think about in terms of what that means, just even for our staff as we're working on that. Have we truly communicated what we mean by equity? That word is getting tossed around a lot. And I think there's a lot of confusion about, or people want to choose to make it confusing, but it really doesn't have to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. Not only are you looking at how it is understood, but how is it applied to the various efforts? So I think I had brought up in the last call that the work that the governor's office is doing around the hunger and access to healthy food, that I know a lot of agencies are working on, as well as us, that task force went through a lot of effort to come up with their equity principles, and I need to I'll share that with the group too, because I think that was insightful too.
Okay.
But all right. Okay, well, I'm not hearing any other comments, and Felicia from EDD is helping monitor the chat because it comes up really small on my screen. So I'll go ahead and move on to agenda number item number 7. And we have a guest joining us, Rose Roher, and I'll let you pronounce correctly your last name, Rose. Sorry if I'm not getting that right, but from Bieber at the University of New Mexico. And she's here today to talk about some news that we received recently related to HB 164, related to the uranium mine cleanup efforts, and how that is set to impact the work around our current 9 targeted economic development targeted industries. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Rose. Are you with us, and do you have access to you? Okay, there you are. Hi there.
Hi. Yeah, I got that. I'm not going to share screen, so I'll just do the video
Okay.
for now. I didn't
right.
prepare slides for this, but I'm going to put in the chat right now a link to, oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am. There it is. I'm going to put a link to the Beaver webpage that has our project stuff on it, but I want to say that we're currently revamping our website. And so the full report that Beaver did that was related to uranium mine cleanup is there, as well as I think one presentation. We have other presentations that they're just in the process of uploading a number of the things. But it's a good spot to go, and the report there is broken up into chapters as well, so you don't have to read all 120 or whatever pages it might be. A good place to start is the recommendations section. So yeah, I'm Rose Rohr. I don't like pronouncing my last name either, so I usually just say I'm Rose. And I'm from Bieber, and I was the lead research scientist on the uranium mine cleanup project that was sponsored through legislation done with Wanda Johnson and a community group, the Multicultural Alliance for a Safe Environment. We did that in 2019 into 2020. We did the research. And the research was really to look at what the economic benefits and costs would be to engaging more in this in uranium mine cleanup. And it was very narrow and very specific. And actually, the way it got written into the junior bill was very strange and somewhat inaccurate compared to what was in the memorial. But that's how those things go, right? So what we did was we interviewed businesses and communities, stakeholders, rights holders. We interviewed the educational institutions, people in organizations such as a number of the ones that you all are in, and tried to just develop a picture of what uranium mine cleanup looked like in New Mexico. And then we developed recommendations out of that that came into categories for businesses, for workforce development, for vision, and just for looking at how to organize things within the state perhaps a little bit differently. And so really I kind of want to do this as a bit of a Q&A. What I can say as far as the state plan that came out, the state strategic plan that came out, is that some of those people that I've been working with, or that we were working with, the Multicultural Alliance for a Safe Environment, and those people have been very active in promoting our study. Believe me, I never expected to keep having this conversation for so long afterwards, and it's been great to see them doing that. But that's definitely how we're winding up still talking about this in news articles and in groups now, and I think it's great. So I'm really grateful to them for doing that, but I'm not sure that the message is always translating appropriately, because the way that it's written into the strategic plan, or into the House bill, at least in part, focuses on uranium mine cleanup specifically. And a lot of what we talked about in the report was how that's a sliver of the pie. It's a big sliver, but I guess so. It's a big wedge of the pie. But that really we had recommended an environmental remediation industry development more than just uranium mine, which is part of that, because what we found was that money is not always flowing consistently into the state for cleanup efforts, and especially for uranium mine. It's here, it's there, it's sometimes managed by the corporation who was responsible for the mine, and sometimes it's managed by the EPA. And so it's this messy network that businesses have to get into, the state has to get into, who's going to be responsible, who's going to get hired, how do we know we have the right staff on hand? And it's just messy. And even finding records of what could be done was extraordinarily messy. We estimated somewhere around 1,000 unaddressed mine and uranium sites. That includes mines, exploration, drilling, mills. It included a lot. And I think that the MNERD estimate is closer to 500. And I think the Navajo Nation estimate for just their space is also different. So we have even different estimates of what exists. And it's become this situation where our major recommendation was we need everybody to get on the same page and start communicating. So when these contracts come in, like this $1 billion that's come in through the EPA and the Navajo Nation in particular, that New Mexico businesses are ready to bid on subcontracts and perhaps even over time develop big enough industry that we could be the Tetra Tech, we could be the ones getting the original contract rather than having it outsourced to other places. So that's kind of what we laid out in the recommendations, and I'm not sure how all the different agencies fit in. I know that there's junior money and there's other money that was funded for uranium mine remediation offices, both within MNERD and the Environment Department through this last session. So that's something that's already developed, and I'm not sure where everything else fits in, but I can answer questions.
I don't know if I have a question, Rose, just like I want to sort of suggest to this group that we, for this topic in particular, we pull in the appropriate like division level staff at MNERD and at NMED. So from what I understand of what House Bill 164 does and the money that was provided, is it creates two positions specifically around uranium reclamation, one in MNERD, one in NMED, and there's funding for both of them. And one of the few good things that came out of having the junior money vetoed and then redone was that now it's recurring money, at least for us, which is great. So we will be hiring that person in the new fiscal year. But the wider question of the recommendation of building a reclamation industry, which I think is really where we should be headed, is bigger than just uranium. And I would agree that sometimes the way it gets represented in the media is not quite accurate, or is optimistic about money in ways that I wish they wouldn't be, because I don't want ever to disappoint people. So I would love to, maybe as this moves forward, or we decide in the set force how we want to address this, I don't know how EDD wants to like pull this in, I would love to bring Jerry Shepner, who is our mining and minerals director, into that conversation, because I am a rank amateur in understanding this, and he's the guy who knows what he's doing.
There's a question to me in the chat about the orphan oil and gas well program. I am aware of that to an extent. That's definitely not what I was, it's what I was looking at in part for my dissertation before I decided to just do this full time. But that's not, I'm not familiar enough to answer any questions about that. But that is what we were trying to tie in, is this whole idea that it is more than uranium mine remediation, and we've got this little specific thing that keeps happening, and it's very important, and there is potential for money. But I do think that you're absolutely right, Anna Linden, is that it needs to be coordinated through a lot of these different agencies. And I want to put the suggestion out there, and it might be a controversial suggestion. I never know what's controversial in this kind of realm, but the state mine inspector had a lot of really good information, and maybe it's not the EDD level kind of thing, but even the way they do active mines, and he said it would just take this tiny little repositioning for them to do closed sites with a little bit of different training. And when we went and talked to Navajo Tech and Dene College and Gallup and a bunch of those other places, they were like, yes, please bring in these, even though they have the chance to benefit from doing their own training in certain ways, they were excited about more coordination, because really it's matching people, and we have a ton of the skills, to the trainings, to the opportunities, to the businesses, to the RFPs, right? Or to like the contracts, the subcontracts. It's matching. And that's what we saw is the biggest problem, is that there wasn't a good coordination for matching the skills we do have to the opportunities when they come. So they wind up going out of state. It's like how certain businesses don't understand what they need to keep current in order to grasp the opportunities. They don't know necessarily when the EPA is knocking on the door of some company to try to get money, like they did in summer of 2020. And I don't know how that actually turned out. They went to the San Mateo Basin area and contacted 12 businesses to say, you're going to be reliable, or you're going to be responsible for this. I don't know what the result was of that, but if businesses are able to follow and track that and keep their workers trained and then get matched to the opportunities for grant writing, and for contract writing, then there's just no pathway, is what we saw. And the other thing that I want to note that I think was really important, and comes back to this agency connection issue, is that everyone was very nice and forthright with their documentation, but I had to go to multiple Forest Service actual physical locations at the time, to MNERD, and I spent 2 days at MNERD. I went to the EPA, and mind you, it's multiple EPA offices, because it's different regions of the EPA that manage our state. And I had to go to all these places just to get information, because they didn't have each other's information. And so it's coordination. A lot of it's coordination. I don't know if that's an EDD idea, but that's where I see the biggest problem.
And I do have a question. When you talk about coordination and with the two positions, and to better understand and clarify that, because Anna Linden, you said a rank amateur, and I'm probably below whatever that would be, but where would you envision or suggest that coordination be? I mean, we definitely don't have the expertise, obviously, at EDD in this. So is that something that's being orchestrated right now at MNERD or environment, or where does this live?
Yes. I mean, I don't know we're right at the beginning of figuring it out, I think. But one of the things that did happen during the session when HB 164 like emerged was that I think that we at MNERD and MED were like, okay, we have to sort out who does what, because we don't really know, and therefore this bill is written wrong, so we had to get it amended. So some of those networks are, I think, being grown right now, but we don't really have, and again, I'm not sure what is planned, I only know what is current, a like formal connection point. We do have a MOU with the Environment Department, our mining and minerals and their water quality, which is where the interface is. And that's really active, and like everyone talks all the time. And also I want to apologize for our records. We are actually maybe going to get to digitize stuff with infrastructure money, which will help. But we have the same problem as you. It's all physical.
I want to say that you all did way better though than the Forest Service, which gave me a binder that was this big. And they also had a disk, but they had no computers that would use it, and they wouldn't let me check it out. So I didn't know what to do with the disk. So I wound up 4 hours scanning to my email this documentation. So yes, it was interesting. But I also want to say we talked to Small Business Association as being potentially involved, especially on some of these parts they're just different, you know. And it is, when you're developing something like a target industry, it's massive. Everybody's got to get involved. But I think that the other thing that we found out, and we knew, and everybody knows, is this has been a mess for a long time, especially Native communities and our rural communities. And it's like, how do you coordinate so that the state is stepping up and the Navajo Nation is being heard, and there's coordination, and the Pueblo governments are being heard? It's a lot of coordination. And I think it's really cool that people are starting to be able to be funded to do some of this.
You know, one thing to throw out there, and I'm not sure how many in our partner agencies are aware of, but we do work with environment oftentimes on their brownfields funding project, and that might be a place that is one part that we are helping to coordinate, and however that enters into kind of the cross worlds that we're talking about. And that happens with this group that we have called Fund It, where we do bring on partner agencies, and we bring on communities and federal partners to figure out how to fund projects. And so sometimes when there is a big community revitalization project, or there's some type of cleanup, environment is able to come in with funding through their brownfields project. And that often is just one piece of multiple funding sources. So we definitely touch, you know, this idea of reclamation there. And then the other thing too to throw out is that it would be interesting to, when this is coordinated and we kind of have a strategy or identify the roles of how we're working on this. Obviously EDD, we have quite a bit of touch points with businesses, with economic development organizations, and so could help if that, you know, is an education piece or bringing awareness to at the community level, or to our businesses as well, to get the word out about the RFPs or the opportunities there. So would I guess we can continue talking about this, and I would hope that the consultant that we're bringing on too could help identify specifically what some next steps would be for this, and figuring out who those point of contacts would be. I think to your point, Anna Linden, as it kind of levels out.
And I want to say that if you do have any more questions specifically about the report stuff, I'm always happy to have the conversation. The reports is what I'm good at. The other stuff I don't know as well. I mean, this was my big project a couple years ago, and it's still going. But I think that what you're talking about regarding the brownfields, and really, I think that what we were hoping is that New Mexico could leverage itself against the EPA sometimes in such a way that we can be a little more demanding if we're better coordinated, that we could maybe get more of the funding coming our direction, and that we could maybe target it the way we would want to. That's kind of why we wrote it the way we wrote it as well.
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting, because even as we're still very in the much early stages of this group and the work. It's great to see the climate change task force 3 years into it to have some goals and aspirations, but even kind of how we have structured Fund It to address economic development projects, it might be of relevance to even have some type of a group that's associated with the sustainable economy and the climate change work, that might be a good model to kind of apply to some of these specific projects that are around these issues. So lots of ideas floating out there. So hopefully we can hash some of those out in the upcoming weeks and months. And it's great to connect with you, Rose. Rose joined us kind of last minute in the last week or so, agreed to share some information. So thank you so much for your insight. And if you don't mind, if you're okay, just putting your contact in the chat if anyone has questions.
Sure, I can do that. And you can also link me through the website as needed.
Okay.
I put the website up in earlier that goes directly to the uranium cleanup project, but you can use the menu and you can find me there too. But I'll put it in. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And anybody else have any follow-up questions or comments? All right, we're almost through. I think our last agenda item was group updates. And I did put on here an update on SSBCI, and this is the sustainable, I'm sorry, not the sustainable, the state small business credit initiative that I brought up the last time. And this is the state of New Mexico receiving funding from U.S. Treasury to provide credit enhancement and capital out into the market, out into the state, to give our capital flow and give our businesses a boost at accessing capital as they have been dealing with negative impacts from COVID. And actually, this will be round 2. We had the first round of SSBCI after the recession in the early 2000s. And so we are just in the process of finalizing that proposal to Treasury. So we did put out an RFP for an investment manager at EDD. So that is all happening. And I wanted to make sure that this group is aware of it, because a large part of that programming, the mission is very much focused on the equity principles that Deputy Cordova brought up, that we are hearing a lot about in various channels. And the U.S. Treasury has made it a point to say that they want to see that this money is getting out to socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, that it's getting out to what they call very small businesses, employees less than 10. It's getting out to rural communities. And as we know, the work of this group is focused on making sure that the economic development, the sustainability of the economy is taking into account equity principles and reaching and impacting in a positive way the underserved communities. So there is funding that's a little bit up in the air, but it is focused on technical assistance to socially and economically disadvantaged populations that will be coming through this program. And Congress has kind of been going back and forth about how much the states will receive, but that will be a great opportunity for your agencies, as well as your networks, as well as our communities, to provide direct feedback to us to share what are the gaps in technical assistance to businesses, and what are suggestions of how we can fill those gaps in terms of the technical assistance being provided to socially and economically disadvantaged business owners. So hopefully you'll see a survey coming to you very soon that you can help us by filling that out or sending it out to your networks and your organizations that are helping businesses or are related. So that's it on SSBCI. Does anybody have any questions there? Not seeing any. And this is also a section 2. Any task force members, do you have any updates that you'd like to bring up to the group, or any comments? This is a free discussion. I'll turn it over. I am not seeing any. I'll throw one in the ring. I want to give an update on the commercial property assessment, CPACE, otherwise known as CPACE. So EDD received funding to work with a consultant to set up a CPACE program in New Mexico. And if you're familiar with kind of the trajectory of CPACE, and for those of you not familiar with it, this is the ability for a project, for a business, to finance very affordably any clean energy updates, retrofits, implement renewable energy, and they're able to finance that through a financier using the savings that they have with their energy consumption. And so we have had a bill in New Mexico that has enabled CPACE. However, there's been some issues with it. And I think the bill to improve that so more communities could access that and businesses could actually use it as a tool for funding clean energy projects or energy efficiency updates. There's been some issues with that bill. And so probably, and there's Anna Linden, if you want to say anything, because MNERD is directly associated with this.
Yeah. That was basically what I was going to say. This is our Energy Conservation and Management Division. We do a little bit of CPACE, but we do a lot of energy retrofit certification and all kinds of things like related to energy efficiency. And we're setting up for a bill that did get through, which will be for community block grants for energy efficiency projects. That'll be called SEED, spelled C-E-E-D. And mostly just when you get your consultant, come talk to ECMD. That's all.
We have interviews tomorrow, so I know we're working with your staff as well. So thank you so much. Just wanted to give an update on that. And then also really quick update, the Healthy Food Financing Fund that is associated with the governor's Access to Healthy Food and Hunger Initiative. We are working with a firm that is helping us to set up a Healthy Food Finance Fund. And so that fund will be available to projects, nonprofits, businesses, as well as community organizations, ideally that are addressing food systems, access to healthy food, supporting sustainable agriculture. And that's really exciting because obviously that fits a lot in with a sustainable economy and is one of the targeted 9 economic development industries that we're focused on. So anybody else, last call for any updates you want to share with the group?
Joanna, can you hear me?
Hi, is that Raymond?
Yes, Raymond Montreal. Can I mention, I'd like to mention Economic Development Week.
Sure, Raymond, and I'm going to officially turn it over to public comments, and you are the first to go.
Oh, okay. My camera for some reason is not working, so I'm not on camera. And you're right, this GoToMeeting platform has been a challenge. But
yes.
Anyway, thank you so much, Joanna. I also want to say thank you to you, Joanna, and the Economic Development Group and Jennifer. Because of your help, Joanna, we put a PowerPoint presentation together at the NATO Policy Conference in Washington, D.C., and that was well received. And we talked about the partnerships and the alliances we have with our state and federal partners. And thank you for that. As all of you, I don't know if you are aware, May the 9th through the 13th is 2022 Economic Development Week. And Economic Development Week was created actually by the International Economic Development Council in 2016. And this was done so increasing awareness of local programs that create jobs, advance career development opportunities that can improve our community's quality of life everywhere. And so we've kind of continued that tradition. This year in Clovis, New Mexico, we are going to celebrate Economic Development Week. The Clovis City Commission will issue a proclamation on May the 5th. On May the 9th, we have invited Cabinet Secretary Rick Cerna to discuss workforce issues during the pandemic. He's been invited to follow up with a reception at Eastern Plains Council of Governments to kick off Economic Development Week. On Tuesday, May 10th at 9 a.m., the Curry County Commission will issue a Economic Development Week proclamation from the county. At 10 a.m., we are really excited about Deputy Secretary John Clark of the New Mexico Economic Development Department being in Clovis for an economic development roundtable to be held at the Clovis Curry County Chamber of Commerce upstairs boardroom at 12 noon. And with that economic roundtable, businesses and company officials and some businesses that have received JTIP money will be there as well to greet the Deputy Secretary and to thank the Deputy Secretary as well. At 12 noon, we have a luncheon at Plateau Telecommunications in Clovis. As you all are aware, every year during the session of the legislature, broadband is always an issue in our state and everywhere, really. And at 1 p.m., Deputy Secretary will, John Clark, the CEO and officials from Plateau will give Deputy Secretary Clark a tour of Plateau headquarters. So we're really excited about that. On May the 10th, that evening at 5:30, we will also greet and receive at a reception at the Rock and Roll Museum, welcoming Deputy Secretary of Tourism Antoinette Vigil and Lansing Adams, Tourism Development Director. And then the next morning, Wednesday morning on May the 11th, Deputy Secretary of Tourism Antoinette Vigil and Lansing Adams, the Tourism Development Director, will present a tourism economics slide presentation at the Clovis Curry County Chamber of Commerce boardroom. And again, businesses and folks will be invited to that event. And at 11 a.m., a tour of the Clovis Zoo with the Deputy Secretary. On May the 12th, we're still crossing our fingers. We've been contacted twice already by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's schedulers and folks. We are planning, if she accepts the invitation, is able to come to Clovis on May the 12th, a pretty large luncheon at the Clovis Civic Center. So we could have her talk about what her as governor and what she's done to advance economic development during the pandemic and some of the positive things that have occurred in our state. And on May 13th at 7 a.m., we close out Economic Development Week with a Clovis Curry County Chamber of Commerce breakfast at Cummins Natural Gas Engines, in which they receive LEDA funding from our local Economic Incentive Board, and we will celebrate that event at that time. And we'll have a candle lighting little ceremony because May 13th is Chase Gentry's birthday, and we wanted to honor Chase during this week because he was quite involved in these activities. So I just wanted to share that. It's excitement, and it's really exciting. We're looking forward to the visit.
Thank you so much, Raymond. And if you don't mind, you could send the agenda to me and I'll send it out to the group when I follow up with some of the supplemental information.
Awesome. Yeah. And we were going to also send this to Susie Russell since she is our rep in this area.
Okay, great.
I will send it to you right now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raymond. Take care.
You too.
Right. Any other comments from the public that you'd like to share or questions? All right, not hearing any. So again, I want to thank everyone for your patience as we utilized GoToMeeting. We survived with not too many issues. And again, thank you so much for your time, your energy putting into this task force. And I'm really hopeful at the next meeting, we're going to have some really exciting updates, and we'll have our consultant on board, hopefully, and be on the lookout for an email from us and EDD introducing you to that consultant, and probably we'll have some engaging conversations with them as well. So I'd like to wish everybody adios and happy spring. Hope you're faring better than I am. I've got pretty bad allergies. So take care, everyone. Please reach out in the meantime if we can be of any help or service. Take care. I'm going to adjourn the meeting if I can figure out how to do that.